Hi there, welcome to Working with Excel. So in our last video, what we did is we took a sign-up sheet and we put in the ID number of the participants, their names, all the information that we had on our sheet, and we did some calculations on the side to look at who's in our program, and we talked about how to make graphs, such as these. Magical. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we want to find out who's in our program, who the participants are. So we're going to make a sheet that looks like this. We're going to have the ID number, the person's name, we're going to have a bunch of dates at the top, and we're going to look at who showed up. And basically in this sheet, the only thing that we're going to do is put an X for Raymond if he came on May 24th. So essentially on May 24th, there's 4 people that came, and next to their names we put an X. April 5th, there's 6 people that came, we put X's next to their names, and so on. Okay, pretty simple. So to do that, based on this data, we want to copy some of the data off this sheet so we have it somewhere else. So I'm going to open a new sheet down at the bottom, and I'm going to call this sheet participation, brand new sheet. And what we want to do is, let's say, copy that ID number. So I'll just press equals in the box, go back to the first sheet, and press on the ID box, and I'll press enter. Now you'll see it copies the word ID. I could take this box and drag it to the right, and I'll get first name. And then I could take and drag it down, and I'll get all the participants' first names from the other sheet. It's a quick and easy way to do this. And like in my previous sheet, I just like putting a green line in there or some color line, so I'm able to remember where to stop my formulas. So I know that when I'm dragging down for a formula, I can go to this range but not past the green bar. It's just a visual way to do it easily. These 3 zeros were blanks. Okay, so we have the person's first name. If you want, we could also bring in the person's last name, and we'll just drag down. Okay, so everybody's names are in the program, and these names are linked to this first sheet. So for example, if we change Raymond to Jim, we go back into the second sheet, and now it's Jim. Okay, so now we'll put in the program dates. So for simplicity's sake, I'll copy them from the ones I already have done, and we'll just paste them up here. Now you can't see them, they're these hash marks because they're dates and they're too big for the sheet. So I'll just spread them out a little, or like we talked about in the last video, we can highlight them and go into format cells and just change them to a date format that's a little smaller, right? And then if we do that, everything fits properly. Okay, so like we talked about in our system, all we want to do is find out who went to the program, who showed up. So let's say, for example, we had the first 4 people come, but nobody else did. On the next date, we had more people come. On the next date, almost everybody came. Now you'll notice that when I typed in, for example, I typed in 2 X's, right? Or I typed in a G, or a D, or an R, etc. In this, the way that we're going to count is we're just going to look at what's in these boxes. We don't really care what's in the box. So you could write a word like sick, meaning the person was sick and didn't come, but if you put it in here, it's going to count it as if they came in, because what we're counting is just we're counting X's or notes or anything else. So it doesn't really matter what is in the box. If you put a smiley face in the box, it will count that too. So we want to know how many people came on the first day. So we just use a formula we already talked about, counta, and we'll look at this range, and it's going to tell us 4. And then we'll just drag that out this way, and it will tell us that something is not right. Oh, yes it is. Never mind. It worked perfectly. So here we have 4 people in the first, 4 attendances in the first one, 5 in the second, 10 in the third, then 2 and 2. That's counting these G's and the R and the D, and all the rest of them are blank, so it counted zeros. We could also do this the other way. So we could find out how many times did each participant come. So we could do counta and drag it this way, and it's going to tell us that that participant came to the program 2 times. We drag all the way to the bottom, and then we're able to look at it. In order to make this visually easier to see, we could also highlight this and do conditional formatting and put in color scales. We could also do data bars, right? So the larger the number, the larger the bars, and it's just a quick visual way to see it. And it's going to auto update. So as we go in and add data, it's going to tell us both how many people came to the program, those are the numbers that you see on the bottom, and how many times each individual came to the session. So you'll notice that I added 5 there. It automatically shrinks down all the rest of them. So this is a quick and simple way that we could just calculate who came to the program on what day, how many people came overall, and then we could do a lot of fancy things with this. So for example, if you did daily attendance, so we could just count out, let's say, 5 boxes, and then these 5 boxes together, we could do a weekly total. So we could do equals sum, put them all together, and that would tell us there's 23 people that came this week, irregardless of what day they actually came. We can do that with the next one, and then we can compare those two numbers together. We could also do something like we could find out what the average is, right? So, we could look at overall the program ran on these dates, the average number of participants, and we just take the numbers of participants that came during the day, and then the average will tell us there's 4.4 participants that came on any given day, and that's really useful to us because we could use that in a report and say, we ran the program, I think it's 10 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, and for each of those times, the average number of participants that came was 4.4. You'll notice on the last session, however, 0 people came, and on one of them, 10 people came. So it really depends, how we organize that. And this is the other way, right? How many times did our participant attend a session, and we can try to see if the average is different here. I'll just select the people who are actually part of the program, and it's going to give us 2.315 for the number of times an individual attended the program versus the number of people that attended overall is 4.4. So that's just some quick ways to calculate this. And of course, like we talked about before, we're also able to graph this. We could highlight the numbers on the bottom, we could highlight the dates on the top, and make a nice chart showing attendance over time. So the next thing we're going to talk about is we did a survey, right? So the first thing we did is we had participants' information, they signed up. Then we looked at how often they participated, and we put an X next to each person when they came. And then we surveyed participants while they were attending the program. So for each of our program days, which is copied from the other sheet, we have a list of names like we copied before, just by the equals. We have numbers. So we said on a scale of 1 to 5, how much fun did you have at today's program? And people told us 0, 2, 4, etc. Right? To make this easier to read visually, I'll just highlight it all and go to conditional formatting, and we could use color scales. Okay, so in this one, red is the high numbers and blue is the low numbers. Okay, so now we're looking at two things. This is by program date for that one day. The other way shows, let's say, how Sabrina liked the program overall. We could calculate this a whole bunch of different ways. So we could look at the total score. So in this case, I took the sum of all the numbers from that day, divided them by 20 because we have 20 participants, and that will give us this number that we can then compare across how much did people like it overall. So you'll see the first day, people liked it 1.95 out of 5, which is 39%, compared to the last day, which is 3.4, which is 68% happiness. And we could take that and graph it onto a graph, and that's what you see right here. So basically the program started, people weren't very satisfied, and then as time went on, they got more satisfied, and they were happy, and everything was great. We could also do what we did with participants' attendance, and we could look at their scores by date. So here, we could just take these numbers. Again, I'll just do conditional formatting. We could use data bars this time. And we can compare how people did. So this is for this one person. So for Cecilia, she put in all zeros. So her score is a 0. So she was 0% satisfied. Whereas some other people, like so for example, Fernando, he was 72% satisfied because he had more 5s than, and so on. It just averages out across. We could do the same thing here, that all the green in this case is the high scores. So we could see right away who was satisfied and who wasn't. And maybe we could follow up with some of the people like Courtney and Sabrina at the bottom to figure out why they weren't satisfied and what we could have done better. It's also possible to gather statistics anonymously. So if you just got rid of these first 2 columns and you just went through and just asked people, they have 20 participants, you just get 20 numbers and you put those down. You do the same thing for each of the program days. Eventually that would build a large number of we wouldn't have individual scores, but we would have is, because we wouldn't be able to know whose answer was whose, we would have basically the same chart. We'd have all the numbers together and we'd be able to figure out what the day scores, and it would still show the same thing. That the program on program day 1 was not very great, but on program day 10 it was fantastic. So far we've taken a look at how to put participant data in. We looked at how to gather attendance, and we looked at how to conduct a survey and gather information from participants. And next, we're going to look at the graphs. So these are all the graphs that we could generate from the program, all the data that we have so far. Now this would be really useful because on these sheets, on the left-hand side, we have all the information that, all the numbers that we got from other places, like from all the data we've put in so far. On the right-hand side are graphs that we generated from this data. And the great thing is that we're able to take these graphs and use them in reports. So let's look at a few of the numbers. You'll notice that all the words are written out here, right? And that way we can remember what the variables were instead of using codes like we did on the first page, just with first name, last name. So here I ask, how many participants are there? And we put in a note that says first name of the participants on the sheet, and there's 20 of them. We break down the gender of the participants and the percentage of people in the program by gender. We look at the age of participants, the minimum age, the average age, and the maximum age. So we highlighted the range and we put in min to get the minimum, the average to get the average, and max to get the maximum age. So the oldest person in our program is 18, the youngest is 13, and the average age is 15.7. We combine age and gender. So we look at, for example, for what's the youngest male age, female age, and other age. You'll notice the other age is 2 years older, the youngest person. The average age for males is 15.7, the average age for females is 15.625, and the average age for others is 16. The maximum age is 18, 18, and 17. So if you're looking at questions about gender, this maybe could tell you some interesting insights, although it turns out that males and females are very similar in terms of ages, but other is not. So maybe that would be something to address. We calculated the number of days in the program. We asked this question, are you allergic to apples, or whatever the intervention is. We just wanted to know if the person's allergic to it or not. And 1% or 5% said yes, 17 said no, 85%, and 2 were unsure. We asked where participants were from. We asked how many apples were given out, or in our case, we did attendance. So this would be how many times people attended. And then we did a few validating questions. Up here on the right, we made some graphs. So we looked at what's the gender of participants, the age of participants. We looked at if they were allergic or not, age and gender together, where participants were from, what date they started the program on, how satisfied they were, and the satisfaction graph we have on the other page. And this also shows us how often people picked the most satisfied versus the least satisfied, and so on. So maybe there's a particular reason on that day that the ratings changed dramatically, and that's something that we should look into. So that's just an interesting thing to look at too. And the cool thing is that if you just click on any of these and copy them, you could just paste them into a Word document and write about them. So thank you very much. I hope that everybody's learned something. And we're going to continue this with a bunch of different tools that you could use in Excel to analyze your data. Thank you.